Welcome to Season 3 of Garth and Sue Talk, a series from Psych Sessions where we bring up a topic of conversation and then we just riff. But this season, things are a little different. You see, I decided to invite some mutual friends of ours to have a conversation with us, only I didn't tell Sue who would be coming, so each episode is a surprise to her. Turns out, this was a good idea. The conversations were fantastic, and they reminded me of the fun and inspiring chats you might have at a restaurant after a long day at a teaching conference. So please pull up a seat as we talk about teaching. I'll tell you, our guest is here because our guest is very timely, apparently.
Well, that eliminates a number of people that I know.
Including me.
Including you.
Yeah, if it was me, I would not be the mystery guest at all. It'll be interesting. I wonder if when this person is revealed in a moment, if you'll say, oh yeah, that makes sense. They were 5 minutes early.
Or I'll be shocked.
Or you'll be shocked. Has there anybody been just scrambling through your mind of people that you think are going to show up on this thing? I guess we shouldn't say that in case they don't show up. And then
That's exactly right. I do have a handful of people that I am expecting.
Yeah.
And I will be disappointed if they don't show up.
So I've disappointed you is what you're saying.
Oh, not yet. No.
Okay,
You haven't disappointed me yet. I don't know how many more episodes we have, but you have not disappointed me yet.
All right. Okay. Well, okay. This person needs no introduction to you. You are well acquainted. And so are our listeners, actually. So here we go. Do you see it?
It is Linda Woolf.
It is Linda Woolf.
And I'll be happy to tell you, Garth, that this is one person that I was expecting.
It is. And were you expecting Linda to be early?
I was not expecting Linda to be early.
And so it's funny that you said it was Linda Woolf because I got no indication and her screen is black for me.
Interesting.
Are you seeing her?
Here comes the video.
And the audio.
Hey,
Linda.
Hey, how is everybody?
Awesome. Who's with you there?
Well, that's Fred and little Fluffy.
Fred and Fluffy.
Yes.
They've seen better days.
Well, they don't eat much. And, I find that when students come into my office, it relaxes them. I also have a fainting couch. And sometimes Fred hangs out on the fainting couch. Yes.
Is your camera able to show us the fainting couch or not?
Well, let's see.
Well. Oh, yeah. That was good enough to faint on.
Yeah, it's an old Victorian fainting couch. It was at a secondhand shop, and I kept going back. And when they said half off, it was mine.
we got to tell the people though that Fred and what was Fred's dog?
Fluffy.
Fluffy.
It's a little cat.
A cat.
The dog hangs out in the research lab.
Well, and the cat is not Fluffy. Let me just say that. So by name only.
Well, I don't know.
These are skeletons, yes?
Yes, they are.
Okay. All right.
Home Depot on sale right after Halloween.
Half off?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Actually, it might have been more than half off. Yes.
So this is a theme. It
is a theme. You need to... on some things. On other things, not so much.
That's true. I've seen that.
Yeah. I better not show my wife your framed picture of a cat behind you because she's going to want one.
It is by one of my favorite artists. It's an artist proof. And I could tell you his name if I could pronounce it, but I could send it to you.
Oh, lovely.
I have a number of his pieces. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So this is your office. You're on campus and it's what time? It's past 5.
And I'm here because no one else is here. Why would I show up at my office when it's packed?
Does that surprise you, Sue?
No, it's exactly as I expected.
Well, we had a lovely conversation together. I don't know when that was. That's 2 years. No, 2 years ago.
At least 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 years ago. Last AP reading that was in person. Linda, are you reading this year?
I will be. I read last year. I am scheduled to read again this year. And it was so exciting. I would just move from chair to chair. So I would read for a couple hours in one chair, and I'd move to another chair and read for a couple hours, and I'd move someplace else. I couldn't sit in the same chair for however many hours it was. It was just not possible.
No.
Yeah. And I was so good at every time I took a break, logging out and logging back in. And then I thought to myself, why am I doing this? So this year I will probably be conscientious. But when they say you can take breaks and you can still remain on the clock, I will be taking advantage of that this year.
Yeah, we are really left to our own personalities if we're given any kind of freedom, right? Where if I grew up as there really are no breaks in life, so you should probably not take any when you're at a reading.
Yeah.
So sounds like we're cut from the same cloth there.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much. It was expressed. It was sort of like if you did, someone else would outdo you, and you would lose your opportunities. So it was more not just because you have this good work ethic. It was sort of fear driven, And then I confess there is a small element. It's just a small portion that's a little competitive. So.
It sounds like the two of you both had lovely upbringings.
We've covered Linda's upbringing, right? I think
we have
last conversation.
Yeah, we touched on it a bit. Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
We touched on it a bit, but it made me who I am today. So I don't know that I would trade it.
Yeah. So it's all right. A friend of mine sent me this. He was talking to me about this book he read. It was a Marine. I forget what it's called. But it's the guy's name is David Goggins. Have you ever heard of this guy? He's a former Marine. This is the pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Stop being so lazy. You can do better. But it's like that Tony Robbins. Is that the motivation? It's like really hard on people. So he sent me a friend of mine. He sent me a video the other day because they're worth laughing at a little bit because this guy said at some point in the video, he said, you need to be harder on yourself. Somebody is going to take your job. They want your job. I don't even know if that's true, but live like somebody is going to take your job, take your wife, take your husband. This is how you need to live your life. And I thought, well, that's one way to do it, I guess. But yeah, I thought it was, so anyway, I'm going to be channeling my inner David Goggins during the reading this year. I just decided.
Yeah. And somebody's going to take your spots.
They're going to take my readers. I don't know.
Because so many people are just clamoring at the door to sit in front of a computer and read the same thing over and over and over again.
Well, what is the competitiveness, the inner competitiveness? I'm going to throw this to Sue. Ready? Since you're an expert on this, what is the? I don't know. What is the competitiveness in readers? Actually, you will have something to say about this at the AP reading. Why would people be competitive when there's just millions, hundreds of thousands, not millions, of exams to read? It never ends. It doesn't matter if you read fast or medium, slow, not so good.
Right. You get paid the same hourly rate. So why? I think it's the same reason that some people become ultra marathoners. That's all I got. I have no idea why people become ultra marathoners. I don't know why people are competitive at the reading. I'm not a competitive person at all. You want to win? Okay, you can win.
Which is why I like to hang out with Sue.
Yeah, you're always winning.
You get to win. It's the only time you get to win. Now there is one person who is listening who is going to be hearing this and going like, now wait 1 minute. So Tanya Hinton, calling you out by name. 2 of my funnest readings, Tanya and I happened to be at the same table. It's a rarity there were 8 people to a table. It's a rarity that year to year you're going to be at the same table with somebody else. But with Tanya, it happened twice. We were at the same table. And Tanya and I have, as it turns out, the same reading rate. And we weren't trying to do that. We weren't paying any attention to it. It's just that we happened to notice that we would finish our 25 booklets at the same time. Our folder would go up and another folder would come. Well, the other thing that we noticed is that I'm a much faster reader in the morning. And in the afternoon, I slow down considerably. And Tanya is reversed. Tanya is slow in the morning, but speeds up in the afternoon. And once we discovered that we had the same reading rates, we started to be driven by each other. So she would watch me in the morning and go, wait, Sue just put up another folder and I still have 5 essays to go. And so she would put head to grindstone and I would do the reverse in the afternoon. Now, why we did that? It wasn't a competition. It wasn't, I'm going to read more than you, Tanya. It was more like at the reading, you've got nothing else to entertain yourself. I mean, it's you and 500 of your closest friends in a convention hangar, basically, and there is nothing else to do.
Yeah.
So for some people, I think it's just them against themselves. I know that there are plenty of readers who want to try and beat their reading rate from the previous year. And if they happen to get a slow reading question, they're really disappointed in that because they know they won't be able to beat their previous year's time. So I think mostly it's just about entertainment more than anything.
Yeah. How can we pass this time? Because it's awful. Those middle days are awful.
Actually, it's not. If you get in the right mindset, you get into sort of a zen. And so I often experience the first day and the last day. And then the middle days are just a blur, and there's fun things to do in the evening. Or I go to my room and, hide from everybody else, whatever it is I do, but I just get into a rhythm of it. And I have sort of planned breaks. So there's these scheduled breaks, but then there's the planned personal breaks that I have listed on my schedule. And I can start to feel when I need one of those. And I get up and I just take a little walk, come back. And in terms of competitiveness with the reading, I don't feel competitive to the people at my table. It is more with myself. And it isn't even in terms of speed, but it's in terms of trying to make sure that I'm more accurate than anybody else. I want to have it perfect. It is more internal for me.
There is this intrinsic thing that happens. Maybe that's not the right word, but I think it is a motivator where when you get aligned with that rubric, and everything that comes through it turns from very murky to black and white. Mm-hmm. That's a cool moment in the reading. What's really interesting is that you never get to the place where everything is black and white. Even on the last day, some student writes something, you're like, never seen that before.
And see, I also like to, when I have an acorn, because I like acorns are those new people who have never been to a reading before. So they're paired with somebody who's had a few more years experience for training. And I like to have points where I know the answer, but I'll ask them anyway, and you can just see that, okay. Yeah. Thank you. And so, yeah, it's, you can blend some teaching in with the grading.
The Zen point, I think, is a really important one, that once you become one with the rubric, I think for most of us, that Zenness happens. And then some point in the middle of the week, this is really a 7 or 8 day process. Somewhere in the middle of the week, you hit the wall and you're looking at squiggles on the page and you can't make any sense of them. And that's when it's really important to get up and go take that walk and let your eyes look at something else. Yeah. But then once you get past the wall, then back into that Zen mode you go, and you're good to go the rest of the way. And Linda, I know that one thing that you really like about the reading is that your world is scrunched down to the 7 or 8 point rubric, and it's point or no point, and those are all the decisions that you're making. And so for those of us who have varied lives, and Linda, I know that you've been acting department chair,
and I've just finished my master's in international relations.
You did. Congratulations.
And a certificate in international development. So I'm a newly minted graduate. So yes, my life has been full.
So those are lots of decisions that need to be made throughout a day that is much more than point, no point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you think about how busy we are, and everybody is, and then how connected we are to our phones and our technology. This is the only time in the year, I feel like, where I am spending a significant amount of time off of those things, away from those things. It's, if nothing else, I feel like it's a great discipline. I think that because of what I even heard you talking about, Linda, I think this is what certain folks would call that flow state that you get in, where you get into something. And as much as there are times where I just want to run away from that convention center because I'm just done reading, there are other times where I'm like, where did that 3 hours go? And that's a really neat human experience. And yeah. And so how often do you get those unless you do something like ultra marathoning or something, or unless you have some pretty serious contemplative practice or something like that? So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I try to regularly take walks in the Missouri Botanical Gardens, and I'll walk there for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. And yeah, I'm away from my emails. I'm away from the news, which is, it's been a rough year and rougher in many places around the globe. And so that's the other thing about the readings. People talk about it being summer camp for psychology teachers. And it really is. I bet in the olden days, people went and built rock walls somewhere, and then they got together and went out to the pub afterwards. And the next day they continued building the rock walls and went to the pub. And so it's sort of similar with the readings, You've got that set job, and then when you're done,
you go to the pub.
You go to the pub, or you go to a ball game. You go to a talk about something, So it is camp-like. And you get to see people that you don't get to see any other time of the year, and develop some really good friendships from working with them.
And Linda,
I really like the blend of high school teachers, because I'm a huge fan of high school teachers. And I don't get to see them that often in my day-to-day life, but I get to see them at the AP readings. And some of the finest teachers I know teach high school. They do things I can't hold a candle to them in many ways.
I was going to ask if this is a memory I'm making up or if it's true. Do I recall that some evenings you would go back and read in your hotel room? Is that you?
That is not me.
Okay, good. Thank goodness. Yeah. I was going to kick you off the podcast.
I might go back to my room and write a paper that I'm working on.
Yeah.
For a class I'm taking, but no.
No, there are some of those
booklets,
super introverts out there who, and I've talked to somebody who doesn't come out to the pub afterwards very often. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you go back and just spend some time by yourself. And but I remember somebody saying, "Yeah, I'm reading a really great novel," and I was like, "Whoa, wait, what?"
Every year I would bring books with me.
Yeah,
and maybe I get through a little bit of it, but my eyes were just, you're done reading. So, television, a ball game, movie on the computer.
Now, Linda, I think I said to you that if there's anything that you wanted to bring in and talk about with us today, that we could do that. Or I have other things to talk about. So is there anything that you were chomping at the bit in order to chat through?
Not that I'm necessarily chomping at the bit to, I can always talk about human rights and world events and how psychology relates to that. But I also think I learned a lot taking classes. Being a student, was a very different experience than teaching. And I've changed the way I teach in some ways in response to that. I encourage it. And I encourage people to take a class, and if you work for a university, you often get them for free. I don't know why it took me so long to figure that out. But, in St. Louis, at least, some of the community colleges are having classes for free in the summer. You can register for a class on us. That's how they're being advertised. Because being a student and looking at the expectations, the way the course is set up, how the rubrics are set up, I realized what I liked and what I didn't like. And so, it's shifted some things for me.
Do you have an example of something?
Yeah, for an example, in my online classes, I often had, the quiz every week in Canvas because I thought smaller chunk of material, easier to learn. And as a student, I found it was like I never had a break. Every week there was a test. And so I even had a professor write and he said, I'm changing my class. I normally have these big things where you do every 3 weeks, these problem sets, or we had a problem set every week. And I'd taken a number of classes with me. I said, I preferred the one that was every 3 weeks. It allowed me to integrate the information more across the various topics. I really could set aside a large chunk of time to be able to sit down because they were all sort of essay in the graduate level and really dig into the material, get some additional resources. And every week it just felt like I never had a break. So that was one of the things. One of the other things is I really discovered disciplinary differences that I sort of knew were there, but it was kind of like, those aren't real. And so, for example, I have a professor who is a political scientist. Their definition of science is very different than our definition of science. And I knew that. But what I didn't realize is how it impacted things like how they describe method sections, or when you're writing a paper that you put the full name of the author and the name of the journal article. It's something I tell students, don't do that. That's just filler. Actually, for this political scientist, this was something, it was when I started reading some of the journal articles related to that class. It's like, no, they've got first, last name of the author and the name of the publication. So just little, so I cut them some slack now because I realized that they're doing this not because they're trying to fill up words, but this is how they may have experienced a professor in a different department.
Yeah, it's interesting how, especially during this pandemic, I have really just had a new appreciation for how difficult it is for students. And I'm going to say particularly our community college students who may not be well prepared for higher education, to come into a place and have different course schedules, like the 3 weeks versus the weekly. They have to navigate that. They have to navigate, these different formatting styles or requirements. They have to navigate some instructors who, grade this way versus that way, and policies, and they're just trying to survive, mm-hmm. and they have to do. So anyway, one of the things that I assume, you can tell me if I'm wrong, that you thought that you probably saw in your program was instructors that were really transparent and clear about expectations versus those that weren't. Did you see a variety when it came to that?
I did see a variety in relation to that. And let me just say at least one professor that I wrote to, who I confess I withdrew from the class because I asked her what her rubric was for grading, and that did not go over well.
Please tell me you saved the email.
Yeah, it's all saved in Canvas. So by and large, the professors that I had were excellent. So this was, every program may have an exception, or you may not have clicked with that professor, and other people may love that professor. It was not a good mesh for me. Other professors were much clearer. If I would say, I'm not sure why I lost some points on this, and they would give me the feedback why. I was like, great, thank you for this information. Or they may have sent, I really liked it when they sent additional suggestions or articles to read that matched up with my interests. And that was really nice. So yes, there was differences in degree of transparency. And as a student, I never realized how much those awesome job, meant. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty good at taking criticism and feedback on papers. If it's, don't tell, that same professor tried to tell me that correlation was the same as causation.
Oh
my head almost exploded. That no, in some cases it really is. I'm thinking, no.
He said, I have 150,000 high school students who will tell you otherwise.
Here's a mug you can buy that it says that on. Here's the T-shirt.
Here's my statistics book.
Yes. But she came from a very different field and perspective. But one of the things I really discovered is that, the other disciplines, whether it's political science or international relations, or I took international law, which I just loved. I loved that course. On courses in development, which we use the term very differently in psychology. How little they know about psychology, but how little psychology knows about those disciplines. And yet they're so connected. We really need to talk more to our colleagues in different fields and use what we know as psychologists to bring change to the world. Because their ideas sometimes are not accurate because they don't know literature, they don't know the field, and we're not talking to them.
I was thinking about you the other day because I was going through the 54 divisions of APA. Where do you, other than Division 2, which we'll talk about in a moment, where do you land? Where do you have other memberships in those other divisions?
Apparently I'm a joiner because I belong to 9 divisions.
Well, which one is the
in part because I like getting the journals. Peace psychology is 48. And so I have a strong connection to peace psychology. 52, which is international. 35 is a home to me, which is women. Sue's raising, I'm supposed to remember them all. 1 is general psych, so I belong to 1. 9, which is SPICY, which is social issues, certainly fits with me. And during the time I was president and vice president, I made myself president, vice president of diversity and international issues, I joined all the diversity related issues, so 45, which is ethnic and minority. I'm also a member of 44, which is gender diversity, sexual orientation. What am I missing?
Well, probably the one you're going to be
History. Oh, I love history of psychology. Everything dates back to history, which is so important to understand the history of psychology to look at towards decolonizing psychology. I read an interesting article about how just adding content, putting up, the posters and really being well-meaning to bring in, Mamie and Kenneth Clark and, all the, the classics, and for Black students, BIPOC students, that really doesn't resonate with them. What the research said is that what resonated is working to change the structure of how we approach psychology, to really address those structural issues, which is the process of decolonizing psychology. So even when you think of research methods, we focus on internal validity and we leave out external validity. That sort of gets, that's secondary. Internal validity is everything. And how that really has shortchanged people of color, women, gender diverse individuals. You're just left out because, too small a sample size. And how we focus on really quantitative methods when oftentimes qualitative methods might be more appropriate to studying indigenous cultures because of the tradition of oral communication. And so filling out boxes, this doesn't connect. culturally with who they are. And when we look internationally, we run into those same issues. So how can we go about not just adding in content that reflects a broader experience, but how can we change even how we think about the discipline? So we remove some of the structural barriers that exist. So, and I'm missing a division.
Well, it's probably the one you're going to be president of next year.
Did I mention 2? Was that in the list?
I don't think you mentioned 2.
Well, at heart, I'm a teacher. And, Sue often makes fun of me. We go out to dinner and I'm teaching away. And I find I do that.
Well, I think we commented on this last time that every time I talk to you, I think, gosh, I'd love to be in Linda's class. So yeah, it's always, and I'm very impressed that you remembered all 9, and Sue was counting on screen for me. So, right. Can you verify that, Sue?
I came up with 9 fingers.
Yeah. So we've got reliability. Yep. That's good. That's good. Maybe we can talk a little bit about your incoming role in 2022 will be your presidential year with STP. Sue, you can start thinking about advice that you words of wisdom to Linda about it. But Linda, what's your hope? First of all, congratulations. I don't know if I've talked to you personally since that came out. So congrats. I'm so glad to have you in that position. I think at this time, for all the reasons that or all the things you were just talking about, kind of your expertise, your experience and your passion is a great fit for that at this time. What are you excited about with coming into STP as president?
Well, I know I need to put some task force together, and I haven't begun that yet because I needed to finish the semester. But what I wrote in my initiatives, which I think was pre-COVID, the world changed. But it's interesting. It hasn't changed that much in terms of my interests. And certainly one of them is continuing efforts in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the society. And how we can look to continue to make STP a more welcome and opening place to diverse populations. And that diversity can be on a huge spectrum, which includes, high school teachers through people who teach graduate school, BIPOC teachers, women, LGBT, et cetera, so that it becomes a place where people have resources and things that they need. And one of the things I hope we do is look back at a division of some of the materials that we already have available to look to see how we can improve on those to perhaps address some of the structural issues that we may have inherent in those. Because, problem with structural with racism and biases, it's so ingrained in us, it just seems like that this is normal. You don't even challenge the way you're thinking about it. So that's part of it. The other thing that I really wanted to focus on is just sort of initiative in terms of making a difference, how we as teachers can teach students to make a difference in the world. That we use the psychology, not just because it's fascinating as all get out and fun, but how we can use it to improve people's lives here and abroad, in family and communities. And then the third thing is ethics. I don't think we do a good job of teaching ethics as psychologists on the undergraduate level. I mean, when you think about the textbooks and you're looking at ethics, you have research ethics, and they talk about informed consent and confidentiality, and it's not bad, but it really doesn't help students learn how to make ethical decisions or broader ethical thinking. And in part, I was looking again recently at the what do we call that? The guidelines for undergraduate education 2.0. Wonderful document, and I know it's being redone. But the ethics section really says sort of when you've reached your pinnacle, you know the code. Well, the APA ethics code is really meaningless for pretty much for our undergraduate students. It's useful in terms of research. But in terms of other factors, it really is more for graduate level students.
I'll counter that. I'm going to jump in and counter that just a little bit.
Sure.
That's the piece of the ethics code that talks about therapist ethics. I think that all students should be familiar with those, not because they're going to become a therapist, but because they are very likely to be the client of a therapist.
Absolutely. You're absolutely, and that's an excellent point. But one of the things that's challenging for me is we have the APA Ethics Code, and then there's the Canadian Psychological Association. They got a great code. New Zealand has a wonderful code. I really like their code. Australia, the Counseling Association, social workers, nurses, human resources. And so most of our students may not even go on into psychology. So how can they learn when I think of those underlying principles of ethics, and then some decision-making models that can help them in their daily lives to make ethical decisions? But I think you're absolutely right. Knowing what psychologists or counselors, because their code's a little different, or clinical social workers, what they can or cannot do would be really helpful, the population. Because sadly, there are people out there who are not doing the things that they should. And, hypothetically, because I don't want to be sued, there's a certain TV psychologist who provides excellent fodder for analysis of what was done right and what was done wrong. That cuts across codes, because if you teach sort of principles in terms of integrity, justice, beneficence, those sorts of things, you teach those concepts which cut across everybody. Then they're in a position to evaluate, is this person doing the right thing? Because if all they do is watch what that particular individual is doing, they're learning a host of unethical behaviors along the way, in my opinion. Did I keep myself from being sued by someone who has more money than I'll ever see?
Yeah, I think so. I think you did well. So do you think that that's a good starting point? Is because as an intro psych instructor, my time is pretty limited when it comes to reviewing ethics codes. If I were to start with the 5 elements from the APA ethics code, would that cover a lot of ground?
No.
Dang it.
I say that because, there's this task force with an APA that is working to revise and create the new transformational ethics code for the association. And the principles have been released from that task force and include some of the 5, but it is much more expanded. So, for example, a lot of it focuses on sort of the individual, but the new proposed principles will include more about peoples and cultures. So as persons and peoples and communities and context and how that makes a difference. Social justice is one of the areas that's been proposed for the new code, as well as human rights and civil rights. Something called scientific mindfulness, that for us to do what we do as teachers, therapists, consultants, that we need to have science behind what we're doing. It isn't just because I think that past life regression therapy is a great thing. If there's not science behind it, then perhaps it's unethical to use that as a form of practice. And that's something that's not in the current code.
And it turns out that's pretty important.
I think so.
What's the timeline for the task force?
Well, the last time the code was revised, it took a little over 5 years.
Yeah.
And we're looking to get it out for a first review of the entire thing put together in around 4 years. So we're looking to perhaps get the first draft out in beginning of next year. We're working on the standards right now. Some areas are really going to be, so some things that are changed, the principles have been really, and it's gone out for first review with boards and committees, those sorts of things, the standards, but we're also going to be adding in a decision-making model, some definitions, which were not there in the previous code. So we're adding some significant elements, but we're currently finishing up the standards is where we're at. And as I was started to say, the teaching, the code relative to teaching is being expanded, because if you look at the current code, it really is geared towards people who are teaching graduate students and how to supervise them and what you can and can't do in terms of publications and things. And that doesn't necessarily apply to somebody who's teaching high school, community college, four-year school.
All right, so I'm going to revise my question. So as an intro psych instructor, and I want to expand my coverage of ethics, would the draft principles from the Ethics Code Task Force of APA, would that be a good starting point?
I think it would be a good starting point. Absolutely. And one that you could integrate into different chapters. So it isn't just, we sort of have it all tucked into that first chapter right after we talk about research,
right?
What you can, can't do. And then we give examples of places where we failed, but then we glorify those examples. You too can become famous and your name will be well known. And, it's just part of the public lexicon if you do it wrong. I don't think that's necessarily a good message to send, but that's what we do. So I have a whole course that I've built around teaching undergraduate ethics, and I build it around fundamental principles. And so each week we talk about sort of different principles. And then I have them go and look up codes. Whatever you're thinking of going into, what does a future counselor say about this? What does just, someone in HR or nursing say about this? Does business have something to say about these?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think that, Sue and I have been having some side conversations about ethics, and it is really difficult to know how to approach it because we all know it's important. But I remember in graduate school getting ethics training, specifically about being a counselor. But I don't remember learning anything about ethics in my entire undergraduate psychology degree program. And other than some very specific things like don't have sex with your clients. I mean, it was very, very specific to being a counselor, and they had boiled it down, but there was no kind of wider connection to psychology either, which I hear is what you guys are doing for APA wide, right? This is not just for BEA, right? Or for the education directorate, right? This is APA wide, and therefore should trickle down everywhere, right?
Yeah, this is the ethics code for APA, which is also then used by a lot of licensing associations, but some other countries, rely heavily on what APA says, but it has been very individualistic in terms of focus, and a little dry. The other thing is, there's the 5 principles, and then no one ever reads them because they're looking up the particular standard. Did I violate this rule? Can I be sued on this? And we're also trying to make sure that we integrate the principles more into the standards section so that it'll be tied in so people can clearly see how human rights is directly related to this. And so many of the issues, whether it's human rights or social justice or scientific mindfulness, that cuts across all the chapters in intro. So when you're talking about, if you've introduced, and granted, these principles that we have laid out there now may change because it will go out for public comment. Everybody has to vote on it, so, but I think it still provides a good foundation because we looked at codes from around the globe and tried to pick ones that would be most useful for the field. So I think it provides a good foundation that you can bring in. So even if you're talking about, child development and something, what's the scientific mindfulness behind this? Is that backed up by science, or is this just something that you've heard? We normally just say, don't use anecdotal evidence. Where's your empirical evidence? But if it's ethical, issue. You know, in terms of how you treat, it's unethical to give people incorrect treatments that don't work. They have no basis. So how can we teach our students that? Or if you're approaching this in terms of how you take care of kids, you know, you can have your kids, you know, what sort of good ways to discipline them and what ways may harm children. The science behind it is more than just what's sort of good or bad. I mean, it's an ethical issue as well.
And to expand that just a little bit, that really underlines the ethics of teaching, that you really need to be sure of what it is that you are teaching.
Absolutely.
If you say X, you better have research to back up X. Otherwise, yeah.
Research and knowledge. When I decided to teach a course about the Holocaust, I went and studied in Israel for a summer because giving bad information is worse in some ways than no information. And I put more international stuff in my course. So I thought, well, I get free tuition. Let me take an Introduction to International Relations course. And then it snowballed. But it's because I want to give my students the best information that I can.
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead, Sue.
I was just going to say that Linda's new degree and certificate were purely accidental. This is Linda taking courses because she wanted to know more about why. And then at some point it's like, well, you know, you're just a few classes away from a master's degree. By the way.
That's sort of what happened. And now it's kind of like, oh, darn, you know, what else can I take? Because, you know, I'm sure other students in the class, you know, introduce yourself. Why are you taking the class? We give all these long-winded answers. It'll help my career. I'm like, oh, I'm taking it because it's just for fun. It's true. You know, it was a lot of fun.
Well, also, I think that now you bring in this really important perspective, and it's nice to have one of our teaching buddies on that ethics committee, kind of thinking about how this works itself out in the classroom. And then obviously in your role at SDP, you're going to bring that, you know, the value of kind of being very widely read, taking a recent degree outside of psychology related to international issues. And I know that's what you care a lot about. And yeah. I do think that like you have this ability, and I think, you know, I think it's probably a matter of, you know, expertise and experience that you start seeing things where people aren't seeing things just because you've been exposed to different things. You've read different things. And so, and I'll just, you know, I said thanks before, but, you know, I have this nonprofit in Thailand that I never connected at all to psychology, ever, never thought about it. And then you said, hey, can I nominate you for this citizen psychologist thing? And I'll tell you what
you were at the top of the escalator in Tampa.
Yeah.
The AP readings, and yes. I'm yelling at you.
Yes. And I thought there's no way there's like, and then I received that because you nominated me, because you had this idea, because you saw it. And now that has given us, our organization, the platform, having that endorsement from APA that says this is important to APA has been opened all kinds of doors for us. In small ways and big ways. In small ways, I can say to my students, hey, we do some of this work out in the real world, right? And this is all psychology in some ways. Yeah. And then in big ways, you know, just being able to, in bigger ways, to be able to connect that into the future to things that we are doing, that either I'm doing professionally or that we are doing as an organization. So that's a long-winded way to say thanks. And I have this feeling that you're gonna, you know, in your STP year, that you're gonna see some things that that maybe other people wouldn't necessarily see. So and that it's gonna be really great for the organization. So I'm excited for you and for us.
Well, I hope. And, you know, I don't think I can bring anything new to assessment. You know, there are the gurus within APA, you know, and STP, and in terms of sodal and stuff. And it's like, okay, that's handled. That's covered. These big picture real world issues and the work you do with Shared Space for All, that's, I get the name right. Yeah. Is just amazing. And you're tackling an issue that has such a direct impact on these kids' lives, because without the work you do, their futures are limited and horrendous.
Very limited.
And I don't know if most of the people if anybody's watching, are familiar with the work you do. Did you want to say a little bit about it?
I talk about it in a lot of, a lot of places, but I'll just really quickly say that we use it. It's Northeast Thailand, poorest kids in Thailand, poorest region of Thailand. These kids grow up culturally. It's good to take care of family, and so they go to the cities. They come from poor farming families, and they go to the city, and they get, not on purpose, but they usually get funneled into prostitution. And so we have somebody on the ground who wanted to start something up, and we said, she's Thai, and we said, we will back you. We'll find money for you to start this education center. So now we educate and mentor, and now it's kind of grown into, we didn't see this coming, but I guess kids grow up apparently. So now we have this like group of kids who are college students, and it's like, well, what are we going to do for them now? So now we're sending, last year it was 3 students to college. That was our first year. And this year it's 7. And I think it's going to be more and more. So we give them full scholarships to university, and that is going to keep them out of it. That is going to give them an option. So, Anyway, for anybody who's interested, we just did a little presentation. It was a virtual event, and it's bit.ly/SSFA2021, and you can see all about us there. So thanks for the plug, Linda. And
you might want to say that again a little slower.
Oh yeah, bit.ly/SSFA2021. Okay. So thanks.
You think about, these are, we talk about, the sex trade and prostitution and things in the United States, and we have images in our heads of, people on the streets, or you think the Netherlands, in the windows. But when we're talking about Thailand or Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, many places around the globe, but Southeast Asia, it's a particular issue because of the change in culture from what was traditionally an agrarian culture to a manufacturing culture, and the impact. So my shoes have had a huge impact on the lives of these folks. And so we're talking about, little girls and boys, 5, 6, 7, or 8, being prostituted, just the sexual exploitation that occurs. And that versus going to college.
Yeah.
And the opportunities that provides in a country that's undergoing such transition and poverty. It's immeasurable, the difference you're making in these kids' lives.
Wow. Thanks. Yeah. Well, we feel it, and we have lots of people behind us, and like all of our psychology community has been unbelievable in supporting us. So we feel really lucky. Very fortunate. So again, thanks.
You're welcome.
Now, so Sue, when it comes to presidency at STP, do you have any words of wisdom for Linda, or we'll just cut this off if you don't?
Well, I have one thing. I got, this is the best leadership advice I ever got, and it came from Diane Halpern. So it's good.
Yeah.
She said, surround yourself with good people and get out of their way.
Okay. That sounds like a good plan.
It's worked for me.
That's good. That's a really good.
Yeah.
Diane seems to know a thing or two.
She knows a thing or two.
Diane is, I owe a lot to Diane. I know I've said it before. I was at Night Top. You put together your little poster to go to Night Top. It's in Florida on the beach in January. So, you want to go present your work and things. And I put together my nice little poster, and she wandered by, and she said, other people need to know about this. for me, it was an interesting little project presented here at NITOP. And I was like, oh, she's absolutely right. No one else is talking about this. Perhaps I need to put together some materials related to the Holocaust or teaching genocide. And so I started doing that. And so the reason I'm sitting in this chair in many ways is because Diane walked by and said, other people need to know about this. And it's so simple. And I don't know why I hadn't thought of it. But she was right.
You know what? You both share that. Sue, you have that, whatever that is, you have that in terms of the how practically helpful you believe that intro psych can be for students, how transformative it can be. And thousands of teachers have come before you. I'm sure a few of them had the same idea and same thought, but many didn't, including myself. And then you had a platform, and what you said really resonated with people because nobody was saying it, that we need to rethink the way that we're doing this. And I love when people are bringing this freshness to what we do, because it's really energizing. So, all right. Well, Linda, this is so nice. I mean, we're not drinking whiskey this time, fun. And it's still nice. Yeah.
Because I got to drive home. I wish somehow on here got a DUI on the way home. This really is not good. So.
Yeah,
good for you for thinking ahead.
Yeah. And I'm a lightweight drinker. Sue's seen me. One beer and I'm staggering,
Oh, yeah. And if folks want to hear about your roommate relationship at the AP reading, they should go back and listen to the Linda Woolf episode on the original psych sessions, which was also great fun. Sue, always nice to see you. And Linda, thanks for joining us.
Well, always a pleasure.
Yep.